Right now, there are over 8,000 distinct tribes and ethnic groups scattered across the planet. Different languages, different customs, different rules for survival. But here's the part that doesn't add up at first. Every single human alive today descends from the same small population that lived in Africa roughly 200,000 years ago. So, how did one group become thousands? The answer isn't war, and it isn't really culture either. It comes down to something far more basic, a hard limit your brain physically can't get past. In the early 1990s, a British anthropologist named Robin Dunbar was studying primate brains when he noticed something consistent across species. The bigger a primate's neocortex, the part of the brain responsible for processing complex relationships, the larger its natural social group tended to be. Dunbar applied that same formula to humans, using brain size and processing capacity to calculate a theoretical ceiling on stable relationships any one person could realistically maintain. The number he landed on was 150. This wasn't a casual guess, it was a calculation rooted in cognitive load. Beyond roughly 150 meaningful relationships, the human brain simply can't reliably track who everyone is, how they relate to one another, and whether each person can be trusted. When Dunbar checked this number against real hunter-gatherer societies, historical village sizes, and even structured units like Roman military legions, the same pattern kept showing up, independently across cultures that had zero contact with each other. Communities consistently organized around groups close to 150 people, but humans didn't even need to reach 150 to start splitting apart. Anthropological research on hunter-gatherer bands shows they typically operated in much smaller units, somewhere between 20 and 50 people, small enough that everyone could coordinate movement, hunt cooperatively, and divide resources without serious conflict. The moment a group expanded past that comfortable range, predictable problems emerged. Tension increased. Group decisions became harder to reach. Disagreements multiplied. And food, water, and shelter had to stretch across more mouths than the land could comfortably support. So the group split. Anthropologists call this pattern fission-fusion, bands breaking apart into smaller, more manageable units whenever resources got stretched too thin, sometimes reuniting later once conditions improved again. This kind of split wasn't usually dramatic. It rarely involved war or betrayal. More often, it was simply a handful of families deciding to follow a different migrating herd, settle near an alternate water source, or create distance from a band that had become too crowded to function smoothly. But here's where things get genuinely interesting. Once a group physically separated, an entirely different force took over: isolation. Separated bands stopped sharing the same daily experiences. They hunted different animals, adapted to different climates, and solved local problems in their own way. Across generations, language drifted further apart. Customs adapted independently to each environment. A ritual that carried one meaning in one group could mean something else entirely just a few hundred miles away. And this effect compounded over time. A single group of 150 splits into two groups of roughly 75. Those smaller groups eventually grow, hit their own version of the same limit, and split again. Repeat that process across tens of thousands of years, layered on top of mass migrations that carried early humans out of Africa into Europe, Asia, and eventually the Americas, and you get exactly what exists today. Thousands of distinct tribes, languages, and cultures, every one of them tracing back to the same original population. The split was never deliberately designed by anyone. It was forced into existence by the limits of brain capacity, by the limits of food supply, and eventually by sheer physical distance. So tribes didn't form because ancient humans actively wanted to be different from one another. They formed because no single group could realistically stay unified forever once it grew too large to manage internally and spread too far to keep sharing the exact same resources. Every distinct culture, language, and tradition that exists on Earth today is really just the long-term result of one original human group, splitting apart again and again slowly until it eventually covered the entire planet.